is Big Play Detroit. I am Chris Castellani. We will have Austin Sisler joining us at some point, but golly, I feel like I've had to do these kind of wonky shows a lot, so I apologize for that. But I'm recording this on Saturday night. I'm going to be traveling via Amtrak. Not that the form of travel really matters that much, but I'll be traveling via Amtrak on Sunday to Chicago, where I will be attending the Tigers-Cubs series at Wrigley Field. Why is this relevant? Well, the environment that I'm going to be in over the next several days would not allow me to record a podcast that I feel particularly good about. So I'm going to record 5 of our segments today. Austin, per usual, is going to take over the I'll Say This segment. We're going to splice it all together, and we should have a full show for you guys. So it's one of those things that maybe the Tigers stuff, I don't think it'll be dated necessarily, but there is a game on Sunday that I don't know the results of yet. But in general, I'm going to spend more time kind of talking about the overall feel of the Tigers right now as opposed to the game-by-game results, because there is a lot to discuss. But we're not actually going to start with Tigers stuff today. We're going to start by talking about what was probably the most impactful news in Detroit sports over this most recent weekend, and that is Steve Yzerman, legendary Red Wings player, the GM for the Red Wings since summer of 2019, has been silently fired, quietly fired, demoted, whatever you want to say. He's no longer the GM of the Detroit Red Wings. And it's one of those classic things where, because he's so well respected within the organization, it's not a full-on firing. He's technically being moved to a different position within the organization. But ultimately, kind of bearing the lead here, the Red Wings are looking for a new GM. And this was surprising. I think that Detroit understandably was going to be incredibly loyal to Steve Yzerman, given his connections and given his history. Obviously, he was the head of things for the Tampa Bay Lightning for a while. Is viewed as kind of the architect for what became a dynasty for them. They made the Cup 3 years in a row, winning it in the 2020 COVID year and then repeating the next year in 2021. Yzerman, like I said, took over in 2019, and now he's gone. And there's sort of 2 ways for me to look at this, 2 different things that I want to discuss. Number 1 being the legacy of his tenure, and number 2 being where the Red Wings go from here. I want to start by talking about the legacy of the tenure because I think that it's relatively unique. We have seen, unfortunately, many bad GMs in Detroit, regardless of the sport. Hockey, baseball, basketball, football. You could do a top 20 list of incompetent GMs or executives or presidents, depending on what team we're talking about in the state. I mean, we had a pretty bad run there for quite a while. Steve Yzerman does not fall in I don't think in the top 5 of worst GMs that this city has ever seen. Okay. There were certain moves that were made that I think the fan base approved of, going out and getting Patrick Kane. Like, it felt there was a minute when you looked at the drafts and you looked at the young talent they had where it felt like this thing was going to get off the ground. But even if he's not an all-time disaster, the Steve Yzerman tenure as the GM of the Detroit Red Wings will be remembered as one of the greatest disappointments in the history of Detroit sports. I don't recall a GM in this city coming into his position with as much hype as he got. I mean, there were people, I remember the day, I was still working at the gas station at the time. There were people that were saying that they had gone out and gotten their Theo Epstein. And that this was going to get turned around quickly. And, it wouldn't have shocked me if you would have told me that it would have been relatively disappointing, because those are extremely high expectations. And the Red Wings, to their credit, they're the one team in this city where they have had championship or bust expectations in the past. There's not a lot of teams in the city that you can say this about. This is one of the most recognizable brands in hockey. It's one of the most recognizable and successful brands in all of professional sports. And the expectation was that Yzerman was going to return to the place that the Red Wings were at when he was a player, which is an organization that was consistently competing for and winning cups. So it wouldn't have shocked me if you would have told me they didn't get there. It does shock me that we get to the end of this tenure and we're talking about 0 playoff wins, 0 playoff appearances. And as of recent history, you had your captain and, a Michigan farmhand in Dylan Larkin request a trade. So as a whole, it kind of has this unique place in Detroit sports history, not because he was incompetent, but because he was another prime example of a GM who was adamant that the way that he was going about things was going to work and nobody else should question it, and you just needed to give it time. Well, they gave it plenty of time, and people, I think, were a little bit fed up with the lack of aggression. He did nothing at deadlines and multiple mid to late season collapses. And when it happens once or even twice, you maybe put it on the players. But after a while, you start to question the culture that exists inside of Little Caesars Arena. So a disappointing tenure, a failed tenure. But you look beyond that, what's the next step now for the Red Wings? Because it is really awkward timing. You just had the draft. And of course, the Larkin news came out about a month ago. And it seems like his list of teams that he wants to be traded to is kind of evolving and changing over time. And there was this popular thought, this popular theory of, hey, now that Steve Yzerman is gone, and it was pretty clear that the relationship between him and Larkin had a fair amount of tumult to it, can you now retain Dylan Larkin? And this is where it gets tough, because I don't want to blow smoke and act as if I'm a hockey expert, but I know professional sports. I've watched Detroit sports. And I think I can speak for all Detroit sports fans when I say that the worst place you can be in is in the middle, right? Al Avila screwed it up a million ways over. But the Tigers' intent when they hit the reset button was correct. They had bloated contracts. They had a team that was underperforming. They had a weak farm system. They had to start from scratch. Now, they screwed it up, and their player development system was completely backwards, and it wasn't really until Scott Harris arrived here and they started developing that talent again that you started to feel good about the organization. We'll talk about them next segment. The Red Wings currently find themselves in the middle, I'd say even below the middle. They haven't made the playoffs in nearly a decade. I think it might even be a decade now. And, you're not close to being a championship caliber team. And I think that the Red Wings, for a long time under Ken Holland, they held on to that playoff streak and they were impressed by it. It was kind of their shiny toy. But I would say probably after they blew that 3-1 series lead to the Blackhawks, I believe that was 2013, it kind of felt like their window had closed and they tried to prop it open. The bottom line is that I think the best course of action is a full-on rebuild for the Red Wings at this point. And they have enough pieces where this wouldn't be, if you do it right, this isn't some arduous rebuild that would take 10 years to get off the ground and we have to wait another decade for playoff appearances. Hockey is a sport that lends itself to parity. And this is the benefit of just the organization you have and the history that you have. This is still an attractive place to play. There is still a mystique that exists for the Detroit Red Wings that that went away for the Tigers for a while. I don't know if the Lions ever had it until recently, and the Pistons lost it, because you think of the going to work Pistons, well, all of a sudden you wake up one day and it's been 18 years since your last playoff series win, and it's like you kind of had to rebuild your identity from within. People know what they're getting into when they sign here. This can still be an elite brand in hockey. It's harder than it used to be, and this team in a post-salary cap era, I think, has only won one cup, but they've had a lot of competitive seasons. They've had a lot of playoff seasons. This was a tenure that didn't work, and it'll ultimately end up being a monumental disappointment, but I still have belief that they can get this right. Belief that I didn't have in the Pistons. And I ended up being wrong about that, right? Like the Pistons found a way to turn this thing around. I hope that the Red Wings turnaround can be every bit as quick as Detroit's was once they let go of Troy Weaver. So that will do it for our hockey talk here in segment number 1. We'll be back in segment numero dos. And I want to talk a little bit about the Tigers and this unending topsy-turvy team that we continue to live and die with over the last several months. Let's talk about it. Segment number 2. We're back. Kind of an awkward segment or an awkward ending to segment number 1. Austin, I think behind the lens, you can kind of put that all together. But segment 2, I want to talk about the Tigers here. And there's a few things that I didn't get a chance to cover last week because last week was a little hectic. Look, as it stands right now, the team's playing a lot better. There's still more things that they need to do. Scott Harris's decision about what to do at the deadline is becoming tougher. I don't want to – I feel like I've spent so many weeks just saying, will they or won't they? We still don't know. And when it happens, I'll talk about it. I with deadlines, I talk about that stuff when it goes down. I don't want to make predictions. I don't want to talk about what might happen. The deadline will come and they'll either sell or they won't. And when it happens, if Tarek is gone, we'll discuss it. they are going to wait until the last second for this. They don't know what team they have yet. It's one of those rare instances where you're just not sure, because we've watched this team over the last several months, and you get this impression this is a team that can play for something, but the record still reflects that they're well below 500, though peaking back, starting to get back into that 500 range. It's a bizarre team, and obviously the Skubal saga has become something of a lot of alliteration here, something of a soap opera, with him talking to the media and obviously the stance that the Tigers have right now and what they should do. And we'll cross those bridges when we get to it. Just want to check a few things off here that we didn't get a chance to discuss last week. The Tigers had a draft, MLB Draft, which, man, I feel like it's been this way for a while, but such a cool idea to now have it, right before All-Star Week. I think I don't know why they didn't do that before. For the longest time, I think it was in June, which was a mess for college players, especially if they were still playing. I'm not going to go through every pick, obviously, but the Tigers' first-round pick, tall right-handed starter Cam Flukey out of Coastal Carolina. He's a Chanticleer. And for people who don't know, Coastal Carolina has actually turned themselves into a pretty legitimate baseball school. They won the national championship, I think, in 2016. And you look at this guy, and a lot of people pointing to the numbers, which this season were relatively disappointing. But this is one of those instances where I actually have faith in the organization and the way they develop players. And I think when you look at Melton and you look at Montero, and obviously Job is going to be coming back soon, they've shown an ability to get the most out of their pitchers. It's a Scott Harris draft pick, which is good because I trust their ability to develop, but it very much has the feel of a Dombrowski pick because Dombrowski loved big, tall, right-handed starters. He drafted a bunch of them. Hard thrower, has some wipeout off-speed stuff. This guy's tall. I mean, is what they call it, a tall drink of water. And I'm not going to go through his whole profile other than to say I don't mind drafting college pitchers. Odds are they're going to get here a little bit quicker than some other guys will. They've been built up a little bit more. My concern with him is the concern I have with every pitcher the Tigers took in this year's draft and every pitcher they'll take in every draft going forward is, when's the major injury coming? And is it going to come in the minors? Is it going to come when he's, a few years into the big league level? This obviously isn't me wanting it to happen. It's me looking at the way that baseball has played out over the last decade and understanding that there is kind of an inevitability to this stuff that it stinks, right? It's awful, but you have to kind of power through it. I don't mind the pick. I understand there's people that saw it and said, oh, they went with another pitcher. This is not the NFL. And we have to stop looking at it that way. In the NFL, you go out and you draft the positions that you need for next season. In Major League Baseball, you go out and you draft the talent. Okay, there's a reason we've drafted a million shortstops. Under the hope that one of these guys kind of works out. You can move guys around the diamond, especially with pitchers in this day and age. Having just brought up the injuries, you can never have enough of them. Look at the way things have gone this season with Rhys not making a single start. We knew he was going to be out all season before the season even started, and Verlander only making one start. I'm fine adding to the depth there. And it's also worth pointing out that for all the praise that people have given Scott Harris's farm system over the last several years, the one thing that people have pointed to, and it's a reason why they've dropped a little bit in the farm system rankings, is the fact that they do not have the surplus of pitching that they do with their position players. So something worth noting. Congrats to Cam Flukey. That's a fun baseball name, right? And while he's on his way in, another guy, and I can't believe I didn't talk about this last week, but another guy officially on his way out, Justin Verlander, announced his retirement. I've talked about this already, and enough time has passed. I just want to add a few things here, kind of in the postmortem, and say, and I pointed this out a few weeks ago, even before he announced his retirement. I'm glad the Tigers made this move to bring him back on this one-year deal. It has not worked out the way that we wanted. I'm still not 100% convinced we're going to see him at all here this season. Like, I don't know. You never know with a 43-year-old who keeps re-injuring himself. And the other thing that I've stated is I truly don't know if it was Verlander's intention coming into this season for this to be his last year. I think that when you have a guy who is as ultra competitive as Verlander is, this is a dude who I think has had 9 seasons, maybe more, in which he made 30 plus starts. The emotional pain, forget the physical pain of the injuries, the emotional pain that has to come with not being able to make that start every 5th day, I feel like really wore on him. And the body just doesn't recover the way that it used to. Verlander could not start a game this year, another game this year, and his legacy is unchanged. He is one of the greatest pitchers that ever lived. He is a Tiger. He will go into the Hall of Fame as a Tiger. He has had truly a career that we will not see again. And at some point, as we kind of get deeper into this, as we get closer to his final hour, I'm going to dig up some statistics from his heyday, which doesn't feel like that long ago, and discuss how absurd those numbers were. I mean, 251 innings in his MVP season. I feel like that kind of says it all. That's like about 50 more than whoever is going to lead baseball in innings pitched this year. He's the definition of a workhorse, and his adaptability as a pitcher, going from a guy that was this classic innings eater to a strikeout machine during his time in Houston, still figuring out ways to go deep into games, still figuring out ways to win Cy Youngs. His career is unmatched, the last of his kind, and I wish him nothing but the best. It was a sad day when I saw that, because it was one of those things that you knew was inevitable, but I don't know much of baseball before Justin Verlander. 2006 was such a huge year for Tiger fans everywhere, and for a lot of us, there was kind of what they were before that year and what they were after that year, and whether it was in Detroit, in Houston, in New York, or in San Francisco, we always kind of had a soft spot for him, as we remember him for being there during the heart of some really fun Detroit Tiger baseball. And hopefully he can come back and we can have a little bit more fun with that, with him this season. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got on the Tigers right now. Maybe in the All Say This segment, Austin will add something. I'm really not sure, but yeah, keep winning games, keep winning series, and it's going to make Scott Harris's decision a lot more difficult. I think a week from now we're going to have a much different, deeper conversation, and I'll talk with Austin about what this deadline should look like. This is why they don't pay me the big bucks. I have no clue. Do not envy Scott Harris right now, because this is a decision come deadline time that has the potential to change the trajectory of the organization. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. It makes me very nervous because those are incredibly high stakes. So we're going to come back in segment number 3. I want to talk about a story that kind of manifested itself in this most recent week involving Jahmyr Gibbs and the Detroit Lions, some sort of manufactured controversy that I want to discuss when we return. This is Big Play Detroit. We're back here, segment number 3 on Big Play Detroit, and I wanted to talk about a controversy, question mark, that sort of emerged and became a hot button topic on Detroit sports radio over this most recent week. So, and it involves, when I talk about members of the media, generally speaking, I only talk about them if I have some level of respect for them. Like, I don't want to come on, I'm not really a believer in like picking fights or trying to act like I'm better than anybody else, but this became a story, and it's a story that comes from guys that I respect. Mike Florio, from Pro Football Talk. He's been around forever, and his counterpart, Chris Sims. They had a discussion about running backs in this league. Primarily, it started with Bijan Robinson of the Falcons, who at this point, like, is there anyone who says he's not the best running back in football? I guess maybe a fully healthy Christian McCaffrey. I don't know. It's kind of beside the point. But him and Jahmyr Gibbs are entering situations where they could potentially be looking for contract extensions. And the market for running backs over the last, I'd say decade, but really half decade, has become very controversial. I want to say Le'Veon Bell might have kind of started this whole idea of like, maybe we shouldn't pay guys into their 30s or late 20s when the shelf life on this position has been proven to only be a couple of years. And that's even if you're really, really good. But as it stands right now, there is nothing internally wrong with what's going on with the Detroit Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs, by all accounts, is going to report to camp. Jahmyr Gibbs will play this season. He's going to get a primary amount of carries. I expect him to have a monster year, and I'm going to talk about that in our gambling segment. But Mike Florio went on, and Chris Sims agreed with him on this take, and they were talking about Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, and here's the exact quote here. He said, and quote, "I ain't showing up for off-season program if I'm Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, do not enter the facility, do not pick up a weight, Do not put on a cleat. Do not do anything until you get your second contract. That's a no-brainer. Okay, well, that's one guy's opinion, right? That's fine. But it became something that was talked about in the media this most recent week, and I guess it probably is worth addressing because not so much because of this quote, because this quote is just the opinion of a guy in media, a well-respected voice in media, but I think when it comes to Gibbs, there is a delicate tightrope to walk that you probably didn't have to walk with Goff or Amon-Ra St. Brown or Aiden Hutchinson. You have a guy in Jahmyr Gibbs who is an elite playmaker in this league. I don't think anybody denies that. The guy is unbelievable, right? He also plays a position that is known to be historically fragile. Not meant to knock on anyone in particular, but as I just pointed, the shelf life for these guys is not great. You have several guys that have already been signed to long-term contracts. I understand that you can restructure, and there's even been some discussion of that with Jared Goff. But then you have this incredibly talented running back who, could he theoretically hold out and try to get that second contract? Yes, if that were to happen, that would be something of a disaster, because I think if you're the Lions right now, in an ideal world, you want to see how he performs this year before you, or at least part of the way through this year, before you start to talk about what a contract extension could look like for Jahmyr Gibbs. Like I said, it's a delicate thing. And I think it's delicate for both sides, because Jahmyr Gibbs wants to get paid, and the Detroit Lions want to make sure that they're paying the right guy, and they're paying a guy who's completely healthy. Gibbs, as brilliant as he is, I don't blame him for this, but showed a little bit of regression down the stretch last year. I think that was more so to do with the offensive line, which they did a pretty good job of repairing through the draft and the offseason. That's the thing I'm going to focus on in the gambling segment. But I guess the question I'll pose to Lions fans, and I think this is the question that the Lions front office is considering as well, is what needs to happen in order for you to feel good about Jahmyr Gibbs being a Detroit Lion for the next 3, 4, 5 years beyond this season? Because in the moment, and we've kind of had these discussions with Tarek when it comes to the Tigers, in the moment when they're dominant, all you see are the dollar signs, and you don't care about the years. You just want that guy here, and I never want him to go away. But especially at that position, one injury can change a lot of that. Is it a fully healthy season? Is it a year where you need to see him lead the league in yards from scrimmage, which he has the potential to do? Is it a year where he helps get them to the playoffs again? What are the main factors for you where you're going to come away from this season, or even halfway through the season, feeling like, yeah, it is a necessity that you lock up Jahmyr Gibbs? This will be the last point I make for this segment. I do think that the NFL went a little bit too crazy with the running back paranoia. Like, yes, the shelf life on running backs is short. The shelf life on football careers is short. Like, and yes, running back is a physically demanding position, but there was a minute there where there was concern of, like, we're not paying anybody. Well, you know what? Saquon Barkley's still going strong, and Derrick Henry's still going strong on his second. I mean, maybe is he on his third contract at this point? Like, I think he might be. Like, he's just kept going. Maybe Gibbs becomes one of those guys. We're going to have to wait and see, but this season is going to be incredibly important for Jahmyr Gibbs, and obviously his success, very important for the Detroit Lions as well. All right, when we return, I want to talk about a little bit of Michigan and Michigan State news. One actually has to do with an administrator at Michigan State. We'll talk about that, and a little bit of Michigan basketball news I want to cover as well. We'll be right back. This is Big Play Detroit. Segment number 4 here, going back to the college level. Want to talk about Michigan and Michigan State for just a second. Some news coming out of the Michigan basketball camp. LJ Kaysen, 2-year player under Dusty May, was playing like the best backup point guard in the country last year prior to his torn ACL. I don't know if y'all remember, but just to catch you up to speed, or get you up to speed, Michigan went on to win the national championship, even with his absence, which is pretty crazy because he was playing at an elite level. I mean, there were not a lot of guards really in the country for a minute there that were playing as well as he was, whether starters or bench players. He became the only member of this Michigan basketball team that had the potential to come back in 2027, who announced that he is entering the transfer portal. This is not surprising to me. Reason number one, LJ Kaysen is a very talented player who's going to get paid a lot of money by somebody, and go ahead, get your bag. Good for him. Secondly, there was kind of awkward timing and awkward positioning with this because LJ tore his ACL in February last year, did not get the surgery until after Michigan's run through March Madness and to their second national championship. Dusty May then leaves. This is a guy who originally committed to play for Dusty May at Florida Atlantic. I mean, he was a Dusty guy through and through, and obviously with his coach now gone, I felt like it had the potential for him to be the guy who may ultimately decide to go to another university, and that's what's going to happen. We didn't know how much, if at all, he was going to play this season. I think the original intent was for him to redshirt and then come back strong in 2028, but then I think this was even rumored before Dusty even left that there was a chance that he was going to come back and contribute at some point in 2027. So the whole thing got messy. It was messy to begin with, given the timing of the injury. It became messier once Dusty decided to bolt to Dallas to coach the Mavericks. Mike Boynton takes over, and LJ Kaysen going to another university. And it's disappointing, obviously, because Michigan's roster retention had been amazing, and they were literally batting 1,000, which was something I didn't think I'd see. But given his situation, the player he is, as well as what Michigan has coming back, is it a loss? Potentially, but I don't know how much of a loss it is for this season. I felt like it was very up in the air whether or not he was going to play and how much he was going to play in 2027. So, look, even though he didn't play in the tournament, guy played awesome, was a major contributor for Michigan in the second half of last year in the Big Ten, has a national championship ring. I wish, or is going to. I don't know if they've gotten him yet. I wish the guy nothing but the best. LJ Kaysen was a lot of fun here and is going to continue to be an excellent college player. Okay, one more thing in this segment, and I think I probably should have talked about it last week, but we had a pretty jam-packed show, and this is Michigan State related, and it's more university related, but it's worth discussing because it does have some impact on the athletic program as well. So things have been in disarray for Michigan State over the last few months. Their AD, Jay Batt, who had only been there for a year, goes to Kentucky. He is now officially signed at Kentucky. Kind of a weird process. He'd been introduced, but he hadn't quite signed a contract, and he was still technically employed by Michigan State. It was strange, but he's officially gone. The other one, Kevin Guskowitz, Michigan State's president, highly thought of, highly recommended, announced that he was going to be accepting a job at Clemson University. A few weeks go by. There's no official announcement. No contract had been signed. And then the other week, it came out that he was going to be staying at Michigan State. It looks as though the campaign to kind of retain him ultimately ended up working. It appears that Tom Izzo had a big hand in this. And for a Michigan State, for a university, and even more so for an athletic department that is begging for stability right now, it's something. I still think, in terms of as a guy who roots for the teams I root for and is focused more on the athletic side of this, I still think Bat was a bigger loss. I could be wrong about that. I could be very wrong about that. But I felt like, as the kid said, I felt like Jay Bat had motion. I felt like he was setting things in place, and a lot of those, the rug kind of got pulled out from under them. He was doing things that maybe a president can't do because a president's not necessarily in charge of the athletic program. But I think that Michigan State, outside of their basketball program with Izzo, who's been there for 30 years or something, 30 plus years, there's been way too much change and way too much turnover for there to be any stability at Michigan State University really since D'Antonio left. I mean, D'Antonio leaves after the 2019 season. You have the shortly lived Tucker era, the shortly lived Jonathan Smith era. Now you introduce Pat Fitzgerald. You've lost multiple presidents. You had multiple changes at AD. You had to right this ship in some capacity. The only downside of this, and this, I actually do worry about this to an extent, because Michigan State, I'm not even trying to throw shade, it's just the truth. Michigan State has found themselves at the center of a fair amount of controversies over the last decade. Like I said, not throwing shade, because if there's any controversies that have gone on at Michigan, they have been made very public, and they've been at the center of more of those controversies. And Ward Manuel's still here. I'm not going to do a segment about that. I'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I still think he's on his way out. With that said, I'm all over the place right now. every time that there is a major controversy at Michigan State, I feel like Tom Izzo has to come out and be the voice of reason in some capacity, which is fine, right? Like, he's been there forever. He's well respected by everybody. I have no problem with that. I just have my concern about what's going to happen when he leaves. Like, I feel like very often he's the one adult in the room that's kind of held this thing together, not just in terms of with his on-field or on-court performance and what he does at Michigan State, but just in terms of cooler heads prevailing. I feel like he's often the guy who kind of says the right things. Well, I'm not saying Michigan State's taking him for granted, but don't, because at some point he's going to retire, man. Like, time isn't going to stop for Izzo, and he's done obviously tremendous things for this university. We'll see where this goes. To me, this is still a developing story because, yeah, he's here to stay, it looks like, for the time being, but what happens if a year from now he takes another job? You know, Guskovitz I'm talking about, not Izzo, obviously. Is this just a Band-Aid for time, or is this the beginning of the repair of Michigan State's athletic departments? And it's not every single department. Obviously, the basketball program's doing great, you get, but as a whole, there needs to be stability at Michigan State University when it comes to the administrators, when it comes to athletic departments, when it comes to the board of the board of trustees, board of regents is Michigan's thing. And yeah, only time will tell. But this was, I think, a big sigh of relief for Michigan State, just to know that they can run it back with a few of the same pieces that they've come to trust over the last few years. All right, when we come back, Austin, fully running point. We're going to be bringing him in for the I'll Say This segment. Austin, let's go to break, and it's all yours, buddy.
Welcome back to Big Play Detroit. I'm Austin Sisler, and as Chris probably mentioned, we are recording things in a little bit of a disjointed fashion this week, but that's okay. I'm here, I'm back, and I'm going to bring you this week's version of I'll Say This. I want to touch on something that Chris brought up a little bit earlier in the show, which is Justin Verlander. He announced his retirement during the All-Star break. He said he's going to finish out the rest of the season, although he's still injured at the moment. But he kind of let us know after it was announced that he was going to be this year's AL Legends pick to join the All-Star game, even though he had only, pitched one game so far this season. He let us know that that was going to be, and this is going to be his last go-around. And, that brings up some pretty conflicting feelings, because as somebody who grew up with that era, I was a kid watching those Dombrowski, Mike Ilitch teams that had Verlander and Scherzer and Miguel Cabrera and Victor Martinez and all those guys. Those were my teams. I grew up playing baseball. It has always been my number one sport. Becoming a professional baseball player was my dream since I was a little kid. And I've even coached baseball since becoming an adult. So Verlander, of course, he's always been our guy. He was our ace. He had such a long streak of starting opening days here, as well as, that streak he had of going 6 innings plus into games for the longest time. But I think we kind of saw this coming, right? He is the oldest player in the game, and he's just had one too many injuries at this point. Now, of course, we all hope that he can end this on a high note, that he'll get another chance to pitch, that he will get healthy enough to at least pitch out of the bullpen, if not make another start, or, who knows how many starts he might be able to make. But that kind of depends on him, kind of depends on where the Tigers are in the standings, because they're catching fire, and they're making this decision on Scott Harris, what he's going to do at the deadline, very difficult. Is he going to trade Skubal away? Is he going to mostly maintain the roster? Is he even going to do a small buy? We really don't know at this point. But if the Tigers are really competing for something, if Verlander isn't up to the task, we might not see him pitch again. So I really don't know. But of course, we all want to see him make a difference and make an impact. But here's what I want to talk about, because I saw this being brought up again. It's been brought up quite a few times over the years, but ever since he announced his retirement, it has been a hot topic again. So I'll say this: Justin Verlander is going to enter the Hall of Fame as a baseball player. not a Tiger, not an Astro. He's going to be wearing the MLB logo across his cap. And, earlier this week, I saw Rob Park was on MLB Network, somebody who used to cover Detroit sports and the Tigers and Justin Verlander in his early years. And he even said that he thinks that Justin Verlander is going to enter the Hall of Fame wearing an Astros cap. And, you know, as much as I don't want to believe that, I also don't from an objective standpoint. Now, there's definitely a case to be had. There's a reason people have been squabbling over this for the longest time now. But here's what I'll say. Justin Verlander grew up here. He spent way more time here, and he's accomplished some really great things here as well. And he's going to end his career here. Now, that is not to, push away the things that he did in Houston. He accomplished quite a great deal. Now, I think had Justin Verlander brought home a World Series title, even if it was just one with Detroit, it probably wouldn't be an argument. And it is going to kill me for the longest time, for the rest of my life, that those Tigers teams weren't able to get the job done even once, because they had the best team in baseball probably 2-3 years in a row. They were a juggernaut for essentially a decade there. And it kills me they weren't able to do that. But when you look at his overall stats, I mean, peak prime Justin Verlander was in Detroit. He had a lot of formative memories here. And I think he knows how special he is to us, the fans here in Detroit. And I don't think he would ever go into the Hall of Fame wearing a Houston Astros cap. I think it's more likely that he would go in wearing a Tigers hat, but I think it's going to be the MLB cap, because he's just had such a special career with multiple teams, and that is not something you see very often. So let's take a look at the stats really quick and what he's kind of done with both teams, so we can put this into perspective. So Justin Verlander spent 13 seasons here with the Tigers. And of course, as I mentioned, he started his career here. He was a homegrown guy, and he's come back here to end his career in what would be, his 14th season. But of course, he's only pitched that one game so far. He's pitched over 2,500 innings here, struck out over 2,300 batters, threw 2 no-hitters, has 9 All-Star appearances, including that one game in which he started, even though that was a very rough outing for him. He won 1 Cy Young Award, although he definitely should have had 2. That 2016 season, it was robbed from him. Rick Porcello wound up winning it based on third place votes, which is kind of ridiculous, although that did create for a pretty interesting staff for the 2014 Tigers rotation, which is that every single member of that rotation has now won a Cy Young Award. So that's kind of a cool thing, but Verlander definitely should have won it that year. Verlander won an MVP here in Detroit. He made it to 2 World Series and unfortunately, wasn't able to get the job done. He's made 5 playoff appearances with the Tigers, and you can't really count that game 163 against the Twins in 2009, but it's not regular season baseball. So in a way, 6, and the Tigers, they might be able to get him to a 6th or 7th, depending on how you look at things this year. Division titles 4, and he's come up in some pretty big outings for the Tigers, especially some of those outings he had against the Oakland Athletics, if you recall. Now, let's take a look at what he did with the Astros. Didn't quite get to 1,000 strikeouts with the Astros, and he's played in parts of 7 seasons for the Astros. He was injured one year, and he was traded back to the Astros after signing with the New York Mets late in his career. But that's about, half the time that he spent in Detroit. 3 All-Star appearances compared to 9 in Detroit. He did win 2 Cy Young Awards there. That 2022 season was really special. It was an insane comeback year for him. No MVP awards, though, which is, very hard thing for a pitcher to do. So the fact that he did it in Detroit is, pretty special thing. He made 3 World Series appearances with the Astros and won 2. So that's going to be the thing that Astros fans hang their hat on and make their argument about as to why Verlander should go into the Hall as an Astro. But he only made 4 playoff appearances compared to 5 in Detroit. 4 division titles to 4, so they're equal there. And he did win more postseason games in Houston as compared to Detroit. But, a lot of this stuff is more team success stuff, which is, it's very, very important. But as I said, he was drafted here. He's a homegrown guy here, had some very formative memories coming up and developing into a big league pitcher. Had some very important memories with his brother. There's that iconic home run that Ben Verlander hit off of Justin in a spring training exhibition or whatever you want to call it. He met his wife, Kate Upton, while he was, in his prime. I believe that was in 2012 or so, the year that the Tigers made it to the World Series. And I believe it was a Foolish Baseball video, if you watch Foolish Baseball, where he made a video about Justin Verlander pitching the greatest inning of all time. And it was against the then Cleveland Indians, now Cleveland Guardians. And it just shows, he got super angry, was throwing heat, throwing almost nothing but strikes, but it was just an insanely impressive outing. So, started his career here, ending it here, made so many important memories and spent way more time here. And so, yes, the Astros were able to get the job done twice and win those 2 World Series. And, they definitely have an argument as to, being considered as Justin makes his decision as to, what hat he's going to wear going into the Hall of Fame. But I think his success in Houston really only makes it so that he's not wearing Detroit's hat and that he's going to wear the MLB logo across his cap. There's no way in the world that he is going to diss Detroit that way, diss Tigers fans that way, because he knows how much he means to fans here. And he feels the same way. I'm sure he does. He, is a very special place for him. And how much time he spent here. We'll see what he winds up doing. I would love it if he wore the Tigers cap in there because, he defined an era here. He wasn't just our guy. Like you look at Houston, Jose Altuve was their guy, and they had a lot of great hitters too. Dallas Keuchel was their homegrown guy who won a Cy Young for them, was their ace for a handful of years there. Garrett Cole kind of on par with Justin Verlander during those teams that they had, a juggernaut team. They had a handful of hitters like Correa, like Bregman, even Springer that spent a lot of time there. And so that was just an incredible team, dynasty that they had built over the course of a handful of years there. But for as many great players as the Tigers have had, pitchers or hitters, Verlander was the guy that we kept here. We drafted, we extended. Same with Miguel as a hitter. Verlander's number is going to be retired here. They're eventually going to build a statue of him, and I'm certain of that, regardless of what hat he wears into the Hall of Fame. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Chris will be back with another segment after this. Stick around.
The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every goal changes everything. And now, FanDuel is giving you a reason to root for every single one. Introducing Every Goal Pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. That's right. More goals means more bonus bets, and all you have to do is turn on your token. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/BigPlay to get started now. 21 plus, select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus, DC, Kentucky, Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat. For Connecticut, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. For Maryland, visit gamblinghelplinema.org. Call 800-327-5050. For Massachusetts, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NEW YORK. Text HOPE NY New York. Call 1-877-770-7867 for Louisiana. All right, we are back. Final segment here, segment number 6 officially here on Big Play Detroit. Thank you to Austin for going out and recording his I'll Say This segment. As of now, I'm not sure what he's talking about, so I don't see myself contradicting anything because we're on to our gambling segment here, brought to you by FanDuel. And I want to talk about somebody who I talked about in a previous segment who I think is one of the most electrifying athletes that we have in Detroit and have had for a while. But I think last year maybe wasn't quite allowed to spread his wings because of circumstances, mainly surrounding the offensive line, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs. I talked about the contract, and that is something we see in baseball all the time. It's something we see in sports a lot. Guys, when they know they are on the verge of potentially making life-changing money, a lot of times just have career years. That's just kind of how it works. There is incentive. There is motivation. They go out and they put up big time numbers. That's part of this. The other part of this is the fact that I think they have done enough for me to feel good, maybe not great, but feel good about their offensive line again. And Gibbs still had a fine season a year ago, and that's with him in the last 6 games, just from a rushing perspective, not being that much of a factor. So the number I'm looking at right here coming into this season, Jahmyr Gibbs over 1,125.5 rush yards. I am hammering the over on that at -114. Not only do I think he gets over in terms of rush yardage, but I think as a receiver, this is a guy which doesn't play into this prop, obviously, but this is one of the few guys in this sport that has potential to have 2,000 plus yards from scrimmage. And I think this year, it was trending this way in 25 as well, but they added Pacheco. Pacheco's going to, I think, do his job here. I think he's a short yardage back, really good backup option to have. This is not 2024 where you're splitting carries. This is Jahmyr Gibbs's offense. And I think with the new OC in place and with what will hopefully be a revamped offensive line, there's few guys in the league that when they get the ball in space, you say to yourself, there's a chance this guy's about to score a touchdown. I feel that way every time Jahmyr Gibbs touches the ball. And I think I look at that prop, and I understand it because in the NFL, like we saw it last year with Gibbs, where you can have a stretch where your offense isn't moving the ball, you fall behind early, you can't run the football. But this guy has so much big play ability that, if he could average 100 yards a game and 75 of those come on one play. I mean, that's the kind of burst this guy's had. He's one of my favorite players to watch because he has that second level, that other gear that even other guys in the NFL can't seem to find. Even other running backs in the NFL can't seem to find. I know by definition, Bijan probably, like I said, the best running back in the league right now, but Gibbs has the ceiling to be not just the best running back in this league, but potentially offensive player of the year, in the sport. I know MVP obviously usually goes to quarterbacks, but Gibbs has that potential. I'm taking that prop -114. Jahmyr Gibbs over on rush yards. Okay, that will do it for today's episode of Big Play Detroit. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Find me on TikTok at Chris Castellani, Instagram at ChrisCastle95. Austin, if you want, I'll let you plug your socials here. I don't know if you want to insert yourself on video or just put the graphic up there. But as always, greatly appreciative of Austin, greatly appreciative of the people at Big Play. And thank you guys so much for allowing us flexibility with our recording times. I think this will be the last time for a while where anything is wonky happens, knock on wood. But this is my version of a vacation. I get 3 days where I get to go to Chicago and watch the Tigers and screw around for a little bit. But duty still calls, and I don't look at this as work. I have the opportunity to talk about sports and talk about my teams with one of my best friends on Big Play Detroit. I do not take that for granted, and I don't take you, the audience, for granted as well. Thank you guys so much. I will talk to you again real soon. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.